Welcome to Asha no Jo Manga Analysis, my second emotional deep dive. I did one for the anime about a month and a half ago, about an hour long. Check that out. Want to hear my thoughts on the anime? I finished the manga about an hour ago. On A, there was a story time. I don't know how many people were involved, but there were at least 40 of us who took a ride from volume 1 to volume 20, and we just finished. We all shed tears, we all came together, and for once, there was a good thread on 4chan where everybody was friendly. That's a rarity. Anyhow, when it comes to the manga, I found out that the anime is significantly different from the manga. It feels like two different stories at many points. So I'm gonna break down a lot of the differences and just how the manga is in general. Evidently so, it is the life story of Joe Yabuki, a boxer with a very unique point of view as a result of his tragic upbringing as a homeless wandering child. Put that together with his no compromise attitude, and you have a fiery character, one of the most iconic main characters ever made in fiction. He wanders around till he meets Tange Dampe, a washed up has-been, a one-eyed alcoholic, lost, with no money, no place to go. But he sees something. He sees Joe's punch. And that was what Dampe was always looking for. Because he's on the lookout for the next big boxer. Because he wants to train this boxer. You could say it's selfish. You could say that he was trying to live his dream through another person. But he meets Joe Yabuki. And they get together. And they reach the top. And they reach the top. In the beginning, the manga is drawn, compared to the very end of it, very differently, in a good way. So the story was written by the author, and Chiba handled the art. What I love is the way Chiba revolutionizes the art as you go through the volumes. The art gets better, it gets more detailed, it gets more realistic. From volume 1 to volume 20, you see just the growth in the art. I really appreciate it. I mean, when you get towards the end, you're already looking like Asha no Jo 2, the anime. That's the growth in the anime. Some of the differences are very surprising. Shuga, the journalist from Asha no Jo 2, he is anime only. He was never in the manga. The personal doctor of the Tange Dampe gym, that old man that followed Joe around and said, "I'll be your personal doctor," he was anime only. In fact, one of my critiques of Asha no Jo is that this character just disappeared one day. He was just gone, never came back again. Carlos Rivera is nothing. Carlos Rivera in the anime is completely different from Carlos Rivera in the manga. In the anime, Carlos is a sweetheart. This very elegant, flamboyant, playful person who's very nice. In the manga, he's this rowdy, cannot be controlled by nobody, does his own thing, is constantly making Yoko and Robert mad, doing his own thing, breaking the rules, getting in trouble. He's nothing like the Carlos of the anime. But they do have one thing in common, and that's their tragic fate towards the end. When it comes to Robert, I had always wondered why, when Carlos got punched drunk, he just abandoned him. In the anime, I didn't think about it. I just thought to myself, Robert is gone. He's not there no more. Well, but the thing is, in the anime, so in the manga, Carlos and Robert were never close. They were never close. In fact, Robert was always getting mad at Carlos. Carlos was always doing his own thing and disobeying. And so it made sense why Robert abandoned Carlos. But in the anime, director Dezaki felt the need to make you feel much more closer, like they were best friends that grew up in the slums. And so if you watch the anime first, you would get confused as how can Robert just abandon a punch-drunk Carlos? Because in the original manga, they were never close. When it comes to Yoko Shiraki, her love for Joe is much more obvious in the manga than in the anime. In the anime, they kept it very subtle, very subtle. In fact, they made anime-only content to make it even more subtle. Towards the end, when she asked that doctor, Jose Mendoza's personal doctor, why wouldn't he tell her that Joe was punch drunk? First of all, in the manga, the doctor didn't know. He made a mistake. In the anime, they made it seem like he deliberately kept Yoko from the truth and apologized. And he asked Yoko, why do you care so much about Joe Yabuki? And she tells him, but they do it off screen, so you can't hear it. That didn't happen in the manga. And so in the manga, Yoko is asking Joe out on dates much more often. In fact, he tells Joe at some point that she feels jealous about the women he's getting as he becomes a popular boxer. So they were not even trying to hide it in the manga. When it comes to Tange, Danpei, and Joe, in the anime, Dezaki made it clear he wanted to show how close they are. And he gave them precious moments. A lot of them did not happen in the manga. Joe was much more harsh on Tange Danpei in the manga than in the anime. In fact, you could say that Joe was almost unfair. In the anime, there was an episode towards the end where Joe and Danpei went towards a recluse place to train. It was an episode just for them that I mentioned in my previous video for the anime. That never happened in the manga. In fact, Joe was very he was so harsh on Danpei, but Danpei understood, that Joe is a loose cannon. You can't control him. But in the anime, they really tried to build that friendship. So I really wonder how much the author and Chiba were involved with the anime, because there is so much anime-only content. I want to know if the original creators had any kind of influence in it. But I was just amazed that Tange Danpei, he's the friendship between him and Joe is completely different in the manga, the original manga, for the worst. I was surprised. So then there's the Rikishi. So Rikishi in the manga, it follows mostly the same thing. There is just one major difference between the manga and anime, and that's towards the end. If you've watched the anime, there's the Memories of Rikishi song that plays, where when Joe's fighting Jose Mendoza, he starts to have visions of Rikishi. And he fights him during these hallucinations. There's the waves hitting them. They're like in a black void. Joe has flashbacks to where he's a little kid living in a cabin by himself. And somebody that looks like Danpei tried to take him in. That entire segment of Joe hallucinating Rikishi and all that never happened in the manga. That was the anime staff trying to build more emotion towards the end. And I was shocked. I was shocked when I read the manga. And I realized that was anime only. Anime only. Many times I cannot believe how much of the anime only material was anime only. The shot where Joe says, "Carlos, you'll be the next champion," and he holds up his drink, and you get a detailed still shot of Joe being smug holding that drink. Anime only. It never happened in the manga. Nishi and Noriko being there at the end in the fight against Mendoza, it never happened. The wedding is the last time in the manga that you see Nishi and Noriko. But the manga did it better because it was even more emotional and bittersweet about it. Because the last panel you get of Rikishi and Nishi and Noriko is when Joe is singing a song and talking about how he used to know Nishi and the juvie, embarrassing him. And he's like, well, we'll have a good life. And he makes this face that it looks like he doesn't care, but he knows that he was the one that Noriko wanted. And Noriko gives him this look that says, this could have been you, but you didn't want me. And that's when the manga ends with Noriko and Nishi. In the anime, the staff felt the need to put them in the audience toward the final match. It's not a difference. The children, Sachi and all of them, they were also never in the final match. They were there when they were last seen when Joe went to the wedding. Joe was playing with them, as he always does. But they were never in the in the audience in the final match. At least Shiba gave us a very cute Sachi panel before it ended. So yeah, the kids were never there. They were never there. Harimau. One of the biggest critiques of the anime of Ashita no Joe 2 is that the Harimau fight was bad. Well, guess what? It's good in the manga. I can tell that what happened was the anime got rushed, and they had to rush the Harimau fight. If you read the Harimau fight in the manga, it is much more brutal. It is much more gory. Harimau is doing all kinds of illegal moves on Joe. He even bites Joe's shoulder, makes him bleed on his shoulder. It's something else. They really did a disservice with Harimau in the anime. So obviously it got rushed. So if you felt disappointed with the Harimau fight, it was much better in the manga, the way it was supposed to be originally done. So in the beginning of the manga, it plays out, Rikishi meeting Joe, being the man that is always ahead of Joe, the man that puts Joe in his place, the man that teaches Joe to love boxing, to love fighting, and shows Joe a friendship through fists, a friendship through fists. And Joe builds this rivalry out of his desire to not let himself be made weak in front of Rikishi. And they fight, and they go at it. And Rikishi eventually gets let go. Now in the anime, they made it very emotional, where Joe is running towards the metal gates, and Rikishi's walking away saying sayonara, and the gates close on Joe, and Joe realizes that he made a mistake. He's gonna miss Rikishi. Rikishi was a big part of him. In the manga, they don't do any of that. It's just Rikishi just leaves, and Joe's like, oh, okay. I do give credit to the anime because it tried to make everything more emotional. Some things work, some things didn't. I want to go back to Nishi and Noriko. So in the manga, the whole point of... I think I picked the right version of the song, by the way, the one where he screams. So the whole point of Nishi is that he moves on from boxing. That's why you see him less and less in the manga, and by the end he's completely absent. In the anime, the staff felt the need to put him in the anime. I don't think that worked, because Nishi and Ashita no Joe 2 just felt irrelevant, reduced to a background character, just there for the sake of it. Then he was nowhere near as good or as relevant as he was in Ashita no Joe 1. He's like a literal philosopher. Nishi moved on from boxing. This is the right version. Yeah, so Nishi moved on from boxing, but the anime staff made the mistake of constantly plugging him in and plugging him in and plugging him in again. But they did something good. They did a lot good. They did a lot good. When Jose Mendoza and Joy Ibuki are in Hawaii, and Jose beats that one boxer and kills him, that was anime only. When Jose tells Joe, "See you again," and Joe says, "See you again," and Jose's like, "See you again." That's anime. That happened in the anime only. It didn't happen in the manga, but it was iconic in the anime. It was an iconic moment in the anime. The Kim fight, for the most part, played the same. But the anime was very creative in the execution of the fight, where they tried to synchronize the sounds of war with the punches during the match. Now, when it comes to the weight loss that Joe did to fight Kim, the part where he draws blood was anime only, because the anime wanted to raise the stakes. Right? They wanted to raise the stakes. So after Rikishi dies, when he dies with a smile on his face. And when they lay out Rikishi's body in the locker room, he's still smiling. But in the anime, he didn't smile. He just looked. He had no emotion. They should have kept the smile, because Rikishi died with a smile on his face because he was satisfied. He was satisfied that he beat Joe. But for some reason, the anime staff decided to just make him show no emotion. They should have kept the grin. So as you can tell, the manga is very different from the anime. It is very, very different from the anime. Other than that, in Asha no Jo 1, essentially, mostly after Rikishi dies, most of that is anime only. Most of it, some of it kind of follows the manga. And then Leon Smiley, of course, was filler. Leon Smiley is the African American from Brooklyn, New York, that fights Joe. He wasn't in the manga. He was anime only. That's why when he died, nobody cared in the next episode because he was a filler character. When Joe and Tange Dampe build that new gym, in the anime, they try to show Joe and Dampe have an emotional attachment to the old Tange Dampe gym, the beat up one. The manga kind of did it, but the anime expanded more on it. They tried to make it more emotional. That Joe and Dampe have an attachment to the original Tange Dampe gym. So for the most part, those are the differences. Now, if we continue the Jose Mendoza fight, in the anime, Jose was completely dominating Joe in the beginning. Joe made some comebacks, but in the manga, Joe gets a lot of pages of him dominating Jose, telling him off, telling him his weaknesses. The anime didn't really push that much on it. In the when Joe starts hitting Jose Mendoza, and Jose dodges and says, "Wait," and still gets hit, and he says, "Wait, how did I get hit? I dodged this." They explain it in the manga. In the manga, Joe says that because he lost vision in one of his eyes, he was aiming his punches in a certain way that it confused Jose, and he was getting hit by them. In the anime, they didn't explain that, so I couldn't understand why Jose was getting punched by Joe when he was supposedly dodging. At least the manga explained it. The part where Joe sits in the corner and Dampe tells Joe, "You did it. You're hitting Jose Mendoza with his own corkscrew punch." And Joe says, "I did?" Kind of to show that he's that punch drunk. They don't do that in the manga. He just does corkscrew punches way into the fight, way farther into the fight. The part where Yoko Shiraki and Joe are in the lockers, and she expresses her love for Joe, the anime unfortunately played it down. In the manga, Joe says a lot more about it, and it makes it more ambiguous towards how he felt about Yoko Shiraki. Like I'm telling you, once the anime got to Harimau, they had to rush. You can feel that the anime had to rush. So the manga is superior in very many ways. So if you watch Asha no Jo, I'm just giving you a surface level analysis. You need to read it because it's a whole different journey. Now, those are the most major differences. I already mentioned Kim, Harimau, Wolf. So in the anime, there's this little mini arc where Wolf, towards the end of the series, meets with Joe, and Wolf says, I need some money for my gym because I need help. And Joe at that point has money, he's rich. So he gives Wolf this money in anime, and Joe doesn't pay it back. And Wolf doesn't pay it back, he disappears. But eventually he comes by and gives Joe the money. That's anime only, it never happened in the manga. Wolf appears towards the end of the manga, but without that arc, it's still good because Wolf was gone for so long, and here he is cheering on Joe Yabuki in the match. It was still good. They didn't need to do the whole money thing; it was unnecessary. And then there's Aoyama, Joe's friend from the juvie days. In the anime, they introduce the juvie crowd early, where they're eating and they'll talk about their day jobs and whatnot. And the manga, they don't appear till already during the Jose Mendoza fight. And in that fight, Aoyama is much more supportive on the sidelines of Joe. And I like that. I like how Aoyama is just cheering Joe on. And then there's as for Gondo, the gangster, the brawler, he makes up more appearances in the manga than in the anime. But what I would say is that the manga is much more brutal. It is very, very brutal. It definitely gives you more of a understanding of why Joe was becoming punch drunk. And I'm telling you, with the Harimawa fight in the manga, Joe takes a savage beating. Other than that, the anime and the manga are mostly the same at this point. But it's just a lot of these little differences. So with Rikishi dead, Joe wanders into the city. He becomes homeless again willingly. And he runs into Wolf, who at that time is part of the Yakuza. But Gondo tells Joe, after the fact, that Wolf is living in the glory of the days that have gone by. There's no fire or passion left in Wolf's eyes. And so Joe thinks about it and he says, you know what, I don't want to end up like Wolf. And he decides to come back. And he has a newspaper clipping of Rikishi. And he tells this Rikishi that he's done being depressed. He's ready to come back to the world of boxing. Now there was a scene in the anime where Joe is sitting by the lake, and he hallucinates Rikishi in the sky, and he kind of starts talking to Rikishi about how he's going to come back to boxing, and Rikishi says, alright, see you soon. That's anime only. That haunted me, because I kept telling myself, why is Rikishi saying, see you soon? So when Joe comes back, he starts to he makes his big comeback, but he can only do body blows. And the anime in Ashinoju 1, Ashinoju 2, and the manga, they all have different takes on this. There's so much inconsistency between these three different versions of the story. It's ridiculous how different they are. Another thing that made more sense in the manga is that when Joe finds Carlos Rivera again, when Carlos is punch drunk and they're in the locker room, Joe is trying to button up Carlos Rivera's shirt and he can't do it. In the anime, nobody seems to care till Yoko points it out way after. But in the manga, Yoko notices right away that Joe is struggling to button up the shirt, starts panicking. Even Tangadampia tells her, you look pale, are you okay, miss? And so the manga, again, explains things much better than the anime does. I don't know what the anime was thinking, but the manga explains things so much better. Joe has better style in the manga. He actually wears pajamas, different outfits. In the anime, he didn't really do any of that. For some reason, Joe is more of a gambler in the anime than in the manga. In the anime, he's always playing pachinko and gambling with the kids, whereas in the manga, they rarely ever show him doing that. I think they show it like once, maybe, whereas the manga constantly does it. Yeah, Joe is extremely aggressive in the manga, way more aggressive. During the fight with Mendoza, he is ignoring Tangadampia most of the time. Won't even listen to him. You know. Trying to think of. In terms of differences, I think that cuts most of it. And so Joe comes back. He meets Carlos Rivera. Here's another difference. In the anime, Carlos Rivera and Joe, they want to fight till the last round because they want to savor the fight. They want to savor it. In the manga, Carlos is trying to win right away. He's trying to win right away. And it isn't until a little further into the match that he kind of sees, oh, this is actually a lot of fun. So Carlos never really cared about having fun and seeing the match the way that Joe sees it. Because Joe, when he fights somebody, he likes to fight all the rounds. He wants to have the full experience. But Carlos Rivera in the manga didn't want that. He wanted to get it over with quick. Whereas in the anime, Carlos wanted to fight all the rounds to the point that Joe, if Joe fell on the floor, Carlos will tell Joe, stand up, Joe, stand up. In fact, the fight between Carlos Rivera and Joe was horrifying in the manga. It was brutal. Lots of illegal moves, back and forth, non-stop. Compared to the Carlos Rivera fight in Asha no Joe 1 and Asha no Joe 2 in the manga, they don't even come close to how horrifying and how brutal it was in the manga. It was vicious. Now, a lot of the scenes in the anime, a lot of the scenes of Yoko going out with Joe didn't happen. They were anime only. The scene of Yoko driving, letting Joe drive her car, and Joe spinning out on the at the beach in the sand, that was anime only. I'm just surprised how much is anime only. I cannot believe how different these are. So talked about Kim. It's for the most part it's the same with the minor differences that I explained. Eventually, Joe starts developing punch-drunk symptoms. In the anime, and I called this in the anime, and now it makes even more sense. So in the anime, the staff tried to make Joe look very forgetful. In the manga, that never happened. There was never a single instance of Joe not remembering things. So the anime trying to put their own subtle thing into the punch drunk. But in the anime, like when Sachi told him about Nishi's wedding and how Sachi told him he promised him to go hang out with them, and the anime is like, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. But it's anime only. It never happened in the manga. Now, when it comes to Yoko, there's a theory about Yoko that is a little wild. Let me go to Asha no Joe 2. So Yoko, people suspect is a masochist. She seems to enjoy when Joe bullies her. And not only that, in the manga, Joe is very flirty with Yoko. There is some interesting tension between the two of them. But Yoko, as abusive as Joe is she keeps that smile on her face. But Yoko is my favorite woman in anime. Yes, you could say that Joe is abusive, but there is a lot of meaning and value in how Joe criticizes Yoko. And every time it's a wake-up call for Yoko, because Joe has a poor background. Yoko has a sheltered, spoiled, and privileged background. Of course, there's going to be tension and conflict. But Yoko tends to learn a little bit more about Joe as Joe calls her out. For example, and I want to make this perfectly clear. When Joe fights Carlos Rivera, Yoko gives Joe a paycheck. And I think they explain this better in the manga, because the manga explains things much better. She told Joe, here's your paycheck. Skip that. Skip that too. So Yoko gives Joe his paycheck for fighting Carlos. And Joe looks at it and says, hey, this is more than what I agreed to. And Yoko says, this is my appreciation for you for the fight. And Joe gets mad and tells her, what are you doing putting a money value on something that is precious to me? Me fighting Carlos is something that has a lot of meaning to me, a lot of meaning and value to me. And he told Yoko, you're putting a dollar sign on something that is priceless. So you have to understand, the times that Joe gets mad at Yoko, Joe's making sense. Like I said, there's a value and meaning in his criticism of Yoko. And Yoko slowly begins to learn this. What I love about Yoko is, there's, the love confession. But the thing about it is, towards the end, she gets the gloves. At the end of the Jose Mendoza fight, Joe gets the gloves. Joe gives Yoko the gloves. They're covered in blood. And he tells Yoko, I want you to have them. Please take the gloves. He's doing it because he's telling Yoko, essentially, thank you. He's telling Yoko, you're the one that made this possible. You're the one that helped me get to the top. You're the one that set up all the matches. And he's telling her, you're the one that supports me fighting Mendoza all the way when nobody else did. And she knows the stakes. But even Tange Dampe was having a mental breakdown, didn't want to do it no more. But Yoko was there, always telling Joe to fight, to don't give up, to stand up that he can do it. So that is the meaning behind why Joe gave her the gloves. Now, Jose Mendoza, I'm pretty sure after the fight, is never going to box again. He's never going to box again. I'll tell you why. No matter what Jose Mendoza does, he cannot knock Joe Ibuki out. No matter what corkscrew punches, tactics, Joe is the type of fighter that puts his entire life on the line. He would rather die than take death as an option. That is why he fights Jose Mendoza when he's practically a ghost. And like I said in my other video, they show it in the anime even better. They show it in the manga even better. That Jose is scared of Joe. And I like how they focus more on the manga on that point than in the anime. Because Jose Mendoza sees that Joe is willing to go all out. He doesn't care if it'll cripple or kill them both. And later in the corner, Jose would tell his second, I have a family and that loves me. Me and Joe are in two different worlds. I can't do what Joe's doing. And Jose snaps and starts hitting Joe, doing illegal moves. In the manga, more happened. In the manga, Jose actually punches the referee and keeps going after Joe. He body slams Joe on the floor, makes him hit his head. And the anime, they didn't show that in the anime. So here is the big god Jose, the perfect boxer, the perfect family man, broken down and reduced to a coward, broken down to doing cheap moves. Joe broke this man beyond relief, and after this fight, Jose will never box. I guarantee you, Jose will never box again. Now, of course, at the end of the fight, you get the infamous panel that Joe has finally burned to white ashes. Now, there's people that say, I don't like this boxing fight. Because Joe didn't win. It wasn't about winning. At the end, Joe wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting because he wanted to reach that state where he finally burns into white ashes. Nothing but white. It wasn't about winning. And that's something people misinterpret about Joe. I will say that the anime was a lot more emotional. The anime will make you cry a lot more than the manga. Because director Dezaki did all he could to make it a much more emotional journey. I'm trying to think of what else, if anything I missed. I know when Joe beats Kim, he gets the title. And more things happen. I can't remember. I mean, I'm improvising this. This is not organized. But if somebody told you manga or anime, it depends. If you watch the anime first and you watch the manga second, you'll be disappointed in the anime. If you read the manga first, you will probably be confused during the anime. But the anime has so many things that help it. You have the amazing soundtracks of Ashinojo 1 and 2, the beautiful art, character designs, all that delicious and anime-only content. But I would say read the manga first, because that is the brutal, truest, most brutal, most raw, telling of Joe's story, and they explain things much better. But I love this series. I can say now that I've watched Ashita no Joe 1 and 2 all the way, and I've read the series all the way. But the manga was so brutal. When Jose fights Mendoza, Chiba really she draws these ugly Joe faces. They were hurting me. They were hurting me emotionally. You know, Yoko being there by the ringside, being with unconditional support. Jose tells his second, why is Joe still fighting? He's practically dead. Does he not care for his own safety? And in the manga only, he adds, is there nobody that would weep for him? This is an amazing series. I don't think anything will ever top this. Also in the manga, Dampe lets Joe know that Noriko likes him. And Joe has zero reaction to it. In fact, he ignores it. You see, the thing about Joe is that he hides his emotions. He pretends he doesn't know. He pretends to be oblivious. But the anime does not clarify that. So you're guessing. But in the manga, they make it clear that Joe oftentimes knows what's going on. But he always puts on a facade. I would like to know the real Joe. I have so many questions about Joe's real character. Until then, though, he'll sit in that corner as nothing but white ashes and face tomorrow because he's tomorrow's Joe. Thank you for listening.